at Wits University. Doctor, good morning to you and welcome to AM News.
Good morning and thanks for having me again here.
Talk to us about earthquakes in South Africa. How prevalent is it?
This is not an uncommon event in South Africa. I mean, like if you look, we as scientists, we look at the data, like you know that in 2005 we had the similar seismic event occurring around Klerksdorp where 2 people were killed. Mm-hmm. And going back again, 1969, when we had the biggest one that has been recorded in the history of South Africa, which was measured 6.3 in Richter scale, and that's its magnitude. So that tells you that it's not uncommon to have them. And most of them are actually caused by the mining activities, like we know. And there's so many other possible sources that one could look at and actually determine what actually causes the earthquakes in South Africa.
Now, talking about mining activity is among the triggers, apparently, we believe. But what are some of the other causes for an earthquake?
Just before we go a bit further, so in Earth, so the Earth is made what we call the inner core, and you've got an outer core, and you've got a mantle, and then you've got a crust. So between the mantle and the crust, you've got a number of plates which are slowly moving against each other. So now, the movements of plates, as they move, they've got what we call the edges, which are the boundaries. And those boundaries, in a geological term, you call them fault. So when the boundaries can't move, the plates are still moving, but the boundary is rigid because your frictional force is higher. So when these plates keep on moving, they move. So what happens is, when the stress overcomes the force of a friction that holds the boundary, that's when the earthquake is released. So that's a natural occurring event. It's something that's got nothing to do with the mining activities. So these are the ones, I mean, for example, we've got the ones that have happened in Japan. You've got ones that have happened in California. These are of huge magnitude. We're talking about 9. We're talking about, I think the biggest that have been recorded in there was like 9.5. Mm-hmm. And those are natural occurring earthquakes that are caused by these major plate tectonics, the movements. So those got nothing to do with the mining. So now you look at the depth at which the tremor and earthquake occurs. So usually these ones, we're talking about the depth to the Earth crust. We're talking about 40 kilometers. Most of these major events, they occur between 15 to about 35 kilometers. So now, that on its own, it tells you what might be the possible source for a seismic event that has taken place. So apart from the mining, so these are just natural occurring earthquakes that so the Earth is just talking, it's talking to us, it's just moving all the time. Mm-hmm. It slowly moves these plates, they move against each other, they're rubbing each other. And when the stress builds up, and that's where the energy is released. And that's, we feel in the form of seismic waves. And so basically when I'm standing here, the reason I can feel the movements but I can't hear, it's because these waves move faster on the ground, so they move faster on the solid material. Mm-hmm. It's more like a lightning. If you can always see the lightning and then you hear the thunder later. Mm-hmm. So you've got these waves, we call them P waves, they arrive first. And after a few seconds, you feel another vibration. So that's your S waves that arrive later. So now the seismologists, and which Council for Geoscience have got a lot of them analyzing this data across the country. And so basically they're looking at the magnitude or the amplitude on the seismic waves when they record on the stations, and they look at the distance from the unknown source to where the event is recorded, and they're able to determine the magnitude. Mm-hmm. So by looking at the magnitude on its own, you can actually tell how big the event is and what risk that actually the event can cause. Yeah.
5.5 magnitude we had yesterday, is that significant?
That's significant for a mine-induced activity. Like, we have a lot of tremors. If you go to the mine, speak to the miners, they'll tell you tremors happen all the time. And if you go underground, you hear the rocks is talking, you hear some funny noise. That happens. This is all under control in the mines. There's mining procedures and precautions to ensure safety in the underground working environments. So the 5.5, it's huge because that should be probably the third biggest that we've experienced in South Africa.
Now, you talked about earlier the Tulbagh area, 1969, I think it was.
Yes.
That was 6.3. That was big.
This is the highest that we've actually recorded here in South Africa. So this tells you that it's not uncommon, but it's rare to actually go beyond 4 in Richter scale. So these ones are very, 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 very dangerous.
Now, Mother Earth, as you said earlier, is talking to us. What is she saying to us?
You know, for example, you're talking about the mantle, there's movements of fluid there. For example, mantle and the crust, these are geological activity. The Earth is moving. And when these things happen, we as geoscientists, we're trying, that's one of the things we try to do, is try to understand how the Earth moves using different techniques. So in this particular case, the seismologist, though, cannot predict when the earthquake will happen, but we study the events and then look at the source. So by understanding how the slip happens on your fault, on those boundaries, we can tell what type of damage an event can make if that's the source. So that's basically what we're looking at. So the Earth is talking all the time. It's just probably telling us it's great science. I mean, apart from all that we're hearing, but understanding how the Earth behaves, that on its own, it's a great science. And it's an honor for some of us to study that part of science, you know.
Now, following yesterday's quake in Orkney, that also had a ripple effect here in Johannesburg. 500 kilometers, up to 500 kilometers, some people felt it. Is that normal?
That's actually, I was also shocked because I was in our building at School of Geosciences at Wits. I felt it twice, you know. And so now, that's not normal. So that shows it's huge. I mean, of course, if you're looking at the magnitude 5.3 or 5.5, according to the Council for Geosciences, that's huge. So what happens is, if you're closer to the location, you're likely to feel more vibrations. As the wave propagates away from the source, the amplitude would attenuate. So those who are further apart, they might not feel it. The fact that this was felt in Botswana, it just shows you that it's a bigger event. And of course, it's likely to cause damages like it's done, as we heard in the news, one person has lost his life and their buildings have been damaged and all that. So this is uncommon here in South Africa to have this huge one, but it's very common somewhere else in the world. In the world scale, this is probably one of the smallest. You know, so that's one of the things that one has to look at.
Do we know at this stage how long the quake was, the radius that it reached? Because, I mean, the report says 500 kilometers. Your take on that?
If you're talking about the epicenter, so what happens is they analyze the magnitude and they look at a distance and they come up with the epicenter. So the epicenter is an approximate location, you know, where the earthquake is. So you cannot say this is 100% correct, but it just shows you it's around this area. And then you've got what we call your epicenter, which will just be, or your focal point, which will be below the epicenter. So at certain, just on the fault plane. That's if your event was caused by the fault movement. So on the fault plane. So that shows the location actually where the wave started to propagate. So now, these are approximate locations which cannot say this is an exact position, but it's just around that area, which in this particular case, it's in the deepest gold mines. That is why it's easy for people to say it might have been caused by the mining activities. But unless the data is fully analyzed, and because we've got stations also, there are stations in Botswana, so there's stations all over the country. So people look at this, seismologists look at this and come up with an approximate location for the epicenter, and therefore they can study in terms of the geological activities at the subsurface of the Earth, and they can come up with answers on what might have caused the seismic event. And
normally at your epicenter, your damage is greater, I would imagine.
Definitely. So closer to your epicenter, your damage is greater because your waves will start moving. If we're sitting in Johannesburg, it happens, they say, Klerksdorp, we're far away from that. So it means that the vibration will be, that is why people report different scenarios. Some said, a few seconds after I had another movements. It's simple. It just shows that we at different locations in terms of in terms of kilometers, just different locations, so we'll feel different vibrations. So if you're closer, you're likely to be exposed to risk than someone who's far away.
Now Doctor, in the case of such natural disasters such as an earthquake, what is the best way to ensure that citizens remain safe?
I mean, the basic, for example, like I've said, this is not new in South Africa. I mean, we have a lot of tremors caused by mining activities. The mining companies have done, I think, a great job in terms of minimizing risk in the mines. I mean, they make sure that the support system is great underground. There's people responsible for that. And also, people, I think, they need to be educated in terms of what earthquake is and what you should do when it happens. You know, for example, you should just empty your shelves. That's one of the things. Empty your shelves, make sure that everything is stable, and stay away from long buildings or power lines, things that might cause problems. And also the cell phones that we use, technology is high now. We use cell phones with flashlight that can cause radiation. And also in the house, probably the lights should be off, because you don't want, when the movements happen, you've got electrifying in the house. So these are some of the basic things that I think the community should take care of, and just say we can avoid what we can. There are precautions out there, those people who work in the mines, and for the people who are not close to the mines, they should also be aware what to do when such seismic events take place in South Africa.
Doctor, thank you so much for visiting us here on AM News and joining us here.
Thank you again for inviting me.
That was Dr. Musa Manzi, geophysicist at Wits University.